would see how close these estimates were compared to this table that we were given at the beginning, right? Trying to figure out what would be the amount, the monthly payment according to what, right, what Zillow says or what the other mortgage companies say versus what this table says. And again, this all just depends. The interest rate all depends on how qualified you are. The more qualified you are, the lower your interest rate tends to be. And the less qualified you are, that means the riskier the bank considers you to be. So when you're riskier, they're going to give you a higher interest rate. So you're going to end up paying more for the lifetime of the loan. Okay, so let's just real quick try to figure out, hold on, let's see. Okay. So real quick, let's just try to see how close these monthly payments are going to be, right? So we're going to try to go, let's assume we're really qualified candidates, right? So let's just say we qualify for a 4% interest rate. All right, so let's kind of think about how that process goes. What we did last time was, if we identify which APR we can qualify as, and we determine how many years we're going to want to take out this loan for, right? Let's say we're going to be over 30 years. Then we then multiply that value, in this case 4%, and 30 years would be $4.77 that you pay for every 1,000 borrowed, right? So in the cases of our homes, we're borrowing quite a lot of $1,000 amounts because each home is worth well over $1 million, right? And in Dave's case, way more, right? So we would take that value of the loan of the house and divide it by 1,000, and then we multiply that factor by the amount that we have to pay per $1,000 borrowed. Okay, so we know that our magic number right now is 4.77. So let's go down here and let's do this for Katia. All right, so Katia's pad. Okay, it's 4.77. Right, this is the, according to, this is a 30-year with a 4% APR. All right, so you would take the value of the home, right? Let's assume that she's going to pay the full amount, right? So 1,995,000 divided by 1,000. Okay, so if that's the case, then let me move this out of here. Okay, so we're going to multiply this by a factor of 1995. All right, so monthly payment is $95.16. Okay, so it's off from what the estimated payment is, right? But maybe they're calculating it based off of the Zestimate, right? The Zestimate. One other thing that we don't really know about this estimated payment is we don't know what percentage of interest Zillow is calculating here, right? So I don't know what the standard APR is for most people. 4% seems a little high. Typically, I feel like typically it's around 3.7, 3.5%. Okay, but according to our table that we have,
isn't the interest lower right now?
the interest is lower right now. Yeah, it has dropped. It has dropped. The problem with that though is that the banks have been so overwhelmed with people wanting to refinance to get a new interest rate, that I know that even though it's lower, people aren't just automatically qualifying for it. So yeah, it's a process, but it's rare when both interest rates and house prices drop. Usually one is low and the other's high, or vice versa. But yeah, you're right. The interest rates are lower now. So I'll show you guys what I was looking at earlier. I'll take a look at it right now in a bit. Okay, so Katia, that's your loan right there. That's your payment. All right, let's see how this one works out. This one, they did give me an estimate, and I can actually show you guys where I found it. So this house, not that one. It's right here, right? And if I scroll down, they have this payment calculator, right? So I've been kind of playing around with a couple of features here. Let me move this up to about 4% just to be able to make a comparison. Okay, now this one is assuming that I have a down payment of 10%. I'm gonna put this down payment of 0. Okay, so I'm gonna try to borrow the entire amount, right? It's saying I'm probably gonna have to pay 6,087, right? So let's see if that's true. Um, okay, so again, it's 4.77 because I'm looking at a 30-year loan at 4% APR. All right, so then I want to multiply this value here. 1.275 divided by 1,000. Okay. All right. So then that's going to be 477 times a factor 1,275. And when we do that, I got 6081. So 60. Right. And according to their calculations, 6087. Right. So right around, pretty close. Okay. Now, if the interest changes, like let's just say, right, it's at 6087. If I were to drag this 4% down to about what the interest rates are at right now, let's just say 3.15. Oh no, that's 3.2. Right, assuming that you can get one that low, it drops your monthly payments by like $600, which is actually quite a lot, right? Assuming that, right, even if you had no down payment, of course it's going to keep your payments high because you didn't put anything down. But that's quite a lot, right? For just a, what is it, less than a full percent, that's how much it can affect your monthly payment when you have a house that expensive. Okay. All right, and now let's take a look at David's. So, okay, same idea here. $4.77 times 165 million. Divide that by 1,000. Okay, so you're gonna take 4.77 times a factor of 165,000. Okay, let's see how close this estimate was. $787. Yeah, so not quite exactly what their estimated payment is. It's actually about $10,000 less per month. Okay. But that would be your payment, man. That's insane. Okay. So I mean the table is like right, it's not the best. Okay. It's somewhat close. It'll get you ballpark. Um but there's other factors to consider, right? So let's just take a look. Let's go back to this one, right? So again, um when you put a down payment, let's say 5%, right? Let's say 5% of the home. Okay. In my case, right, it helps, but it doesn't help as much as you would think, right? Like you put down $63,000 as a down payment, you would think like that's going to make a big dent, especially when the price of the house costs 100, 125, 1,275,000, right? So you put a down payment Like, okay, you think that helps, and then it just brought down your monthly payment by only about 200, right? Because if I go back down to zero, I was at 54.79. Okay, so a lot of times the banks ask for 20% down payment on a home. Now, 20% is a lot because if you think about, even if it's just, let's say it's a $500,000 house, right? 500,000, that depending on the neighborhood and where what city it's at, that could be a pretty decent home, or depending on the neighborhood, it could be like something that's kind of like so like in Pasadena, it's hard to find anything below 500,000. Everything is like above 600, 700. So even if it was 500,000 and you put 20% down, that's still $100,000, right? Of down payment. And think about how long it takes you to save money, and just think about the time it would have to take you to save $100,000. And then you would have to pay that into your house, right? So you might feel like you have all this money, but it's like, nope, you're just gonna use it to pay your house. So in the event that you can afford to pay a 20% down payment, right? In the event of the home that I'm looking at, then we're looking at um 255,000, right, for the 20%. And then there you start to see like a considerable difference in your monthly payment, right? So if it was from nothing, no down payment, 54.79, to a 20% down payment, 43.83. Okay, so over $1,000. Sorry, let me hit enter here. Over $1,000 cheaper per month, right? So that's why a big down payment usually is helpful, um, because then it just helps later on. You don't have as big of a payment. Okay. Um, yeah, and that's kind of how this stuff works, right? So it's tough out there, man. It's tough to get a house. Okay. All right. So any questions about any about all this? Any curiosities? All right. Okay, so then with that, right, we can kind of see that okay, the table is helpful, right? It gives us a good projection of where what we'll probably pay. Maybe not the most accurate, but it gets us ballpark, right? So we can work with that. All right, let's go back here and let's kind of do a little bit more of this before we wrap up. All right, so what we're looking at here is the amount of the loan that is paid off each month increases throughout the life of the loan. Each monthly mortgage payment first pays off any accumulated interest, and then the remainder is used to decrease the balance on the mortgage. Okay, so when you send a payment, the first deduction that comes out of that check that you send goes to the interest. Then whatever is left over, then that actually goes into the balance of what you owe for the house. Okay, so interest is what you pay first, then you get to pay for your house. Okay, so then consider a 30-year loan of $110,000 with an APR of 4.5% compounded monthly. Okay, all right. How is the first monthly payment divided between paying off accumulated interest and paying off the mortgage balance? And what about for the second month? Okay, so basically let's find out how much you're going to send towards your payment, right, your mortgage. And then we're going to try to figure out how much of that is actually going to the interest and how much of that is going to the balance of the house. Okay, so let's figure out first of all how much we have to pay each month. Okay, so if we know if it's a $110,000 loan with an APR of 4.5, let's go over here to the table. Then this person is going to be paying 507 for every $1,000 borrowed. Okay, so for part A, okay, so then here we can see that the payment that he's going to have to make is going to be 507 times 110. Okay, so he's looking at a monthly payment of 557 with 70 cents. Okay, so that's how much he's sending in total. Okay, but not all of that is going to go to the balance of the house. Some of that is going to go to pay off the interest that he owes. And typically at the beginning of the loan period, when you first start paying for something, that's when you pay the most interest. Okay, because the balance of whatever you owe is the highest. As the balance comes down, the interest also comes down as well. Okay, so it kind of seesaws. At first, you're paying mostly interest, and then as the length of the loan goes on, then it starts to flip. Then you start to pay more towards your balance, and the interest starts to decrease. So by the end, you're paying mostly balance, hardly any interest. But at the beginning, it's mostly interest, hardly anything to the balance of the house. Okay. All right. Okay. The portion of the interest, we can find out how much is actually going to interest if we calculate it using this way, right? So out of that 110,000, oops, okay, we want to know how much interest is being paid over the course of those 12 months, or actually in just 1 month. So if the APR, in this case, if the APR is 4.5%, okay, this is compounded monthly. Okay, so compounded monthly, that means that that APR is going to get split up over the course of 12 months. So if we take that interest rate, we turn it into a decimal. We want to know how much interest is being paid in just 1 month, right? Just 1 month. So then it's basically dividing this by 12, right? So how much interest is being paid on this amount, right? Because it's the first payment ever, right? So that means that the balance, the outstanding balance is the full price of the house, which was 110,000. So then what we can do is go ahead and just multiply the value. All right, let's find out what 0.45 divided by 12 is. 0.00375. Okay, and then we can multiply that by 110,000. Okay, so in that first month, the interest that is going to be paid is $412.05 or in 50 cents. Okay, so if you notice that what you sent, right, what you sent in total was 557.70, but everything here is what is actually going to the interest, right? So if you, let's say we do month one, make a little table here. Okay, here is what you're paying in interest, and here's what you're paying towards the balance of the house. Okay, so if you're in the first month, if this is what you paid, and the interest cost you $412.50, then the balance of the house that you, or the amount of money that you sent towards the house, we got to subtract it, right? So 557 with 50 cents minus the 412.50. In that first month, you only sent $145 towards your house, and the rest was all paid in interest. Okay. And then the next month after that, well, you would do the calculation, but it's slightly different now because you send your payment, right? You're able to knock off $145 from the balance of your house. Okay. Did I do this subtraction? Oh, I did this wrong. Sorry. This is 70. Okay. So it's just 20 cents here. Okay. So now let's say for month number 2, or maybe, you know what? I should have done the month 1 here. And then on the next row, we can do month number 2. Okay, because now every month that payment is still the same. Okay, that's the nice thing, is that the payments don't change, right? So you know what you're paying every month. However, the amount that's going to go to interest this time is probably going to be a little bit smaller, and the amount going to the balance of the house is going to be a little bit bigger. Okay, so the reason why is because now what you owe towards your house is no longer the full 110,000. You're going to take 110,000 and you're going to subtract from that the $145 with 20 cents. And then that's going to be your remaining balance. Okay, so let's find out how much we owe now. Okay, so you owe 109,854 with 80 cents. Okay, so now what we want to do is we'll find out how much of the interest has to be paid on that amount. Okay, so it's very similar to what we did here, right? It's the same calculation. It's the 4.5% APR per year, but you divide it by 12 because you only want to know how much interest is just for 1 month. So you want to know the interest for the 1 month on this new existing balance. Okay, so from this value, you would then take 0.045 divided by 12. Okay. All right, so since I have it here, let's go ahead and multiply this by 0.045, then divided by 12. Okay, so now your interest is going to be 411 with 95 cents. Or let's round it up to 96, actually. Okay, so, right, not as much. Okay, you're paying a little bit less interest. This time you're only going to pay 411 with 96 cents. Okay, so you've taken off about 54 cents worth of interest. Okay, which means that 54 cents, instead of paying it towards interest, now it's actually going to your balance, right? So when you do the subtraction of 557 with 70 minus the 411 with 96, okay, it's 145 with 74 cents. Okay, and so that's why the transfer starts to go from less interest to more balance, because what as you make your payments, whatever you're owing to the actual house, that's starting to shrink. Okay, which means that when you take interest on a smaller amount, it's smaller as well, right? So the interest is going to start to go down slowly, and the balance that you pay towards the house, or what you're paying towards the house, is going to go up over time. Okay, but notice after 2 months, right, you've sent, right, just think about how much money you've already sent to your house, right? 557 with 70 cents. You've made 2 payments. Okay, so it's a little over 1,000, right? You paid $1,115.40, and yet the majority of that money, $823 of that, has gone to your interest, right? So it's kind of a hard thing to swallow at first. You're like, wow, like I'm paying so much money in interest. And that's why the interest adds up over time, because those first couple years, it's primarily all interest, right? A lot of it is. In terms of a percentage, like if you want to see a percentage of how much of that money that you pay goes to the interest, you're looking at 74% of the money you sent went to the interest, and the other 26% went to the actual balance of the house. Okay. So that's kind of the hardest thing to get over, at least for me. That's that's what I have a hard time like looking at. Like, wow, like that's crazy. Because you think 4%, and it's like, well, 4%, that's not bad. But you're not really paying 4% of the interest. It's 4% compounded monthly, la la la, right? It's a compound interest that the banks are taking from you. It's not a 4% flat fee. Okay. So there it is. Okay. Any questions on that so far? Kind of understanding how your monthly payments so whatever you pay stays the same, but how it's allocated, right? Depending on what you still owe, that's how much will go to interest versus how much will go to the actual house. Okay, so you're not done paying your house until until the balance of the house, right, is gone down to zero. Okay. Any questions on that? All right, so then let's take a look at part B. It says explain why the amount of money credited toward the mortgage balance increases each month over the life of the mortgage. Okay, so that's kind of something that we already talked about. The money credited toward the mortgage balance increases every month because as you make payments, you owe less on the house. When you owe less on something and you take an interest or a percent of something that is less, the interest will also be less. Okay, so the interest is shrinking and you're making some minor gains on what gets to go to the actual house. All right. And then here, this last one is C. Which of the following graphs do you think matches the overall shape of the graph of the mortgage balance as a function of the number of monthly payments made. Okay, so as the months go by, right? Months go by. So think of the months, right? That's your x-axis, and then thousands of dollars. That's what you owe, right? So do you think it's represented best by, let's call this graph A or graph B? What do you guys think? And the clue, let me give you a clue here. It's take a look at what happens in this case. Right? This is month 1 and this is month 2. Right? Did the same amount of money go to the house the first month and the second month? And clearly the answer is no, right? The second month you sent a little bit more to the house. Month 3, you're going to send even more. Month 4, you're going to send even more and more and more and more, right? So what I'm trying to say is that if the monthly payment to the house, right, not the interest, if what was going to the house happened to be the same every single month, then we're seeing something that's constant, right? Constant payment to my house. Then I know that every month I'm going to decrease by this amount, by this amount, by this amount, right? It's fixed, okay? But it's not. It's actually going to be changing it. The balance of the house, whatever goes to my house the first month, next month is going to be bigger than that. And then month 3 is going to be bigger than that. And then month 4 is going to be bigger than that. So I'm shrinking the size of my mortgage faster and faster and faster as time goes on. Okay. So if you take a look at these two, mortgage balance for the graph number A is saying like, okay, I'm making the same amount towards my progress, towards paying off my house month after month, month after month, right? So I know exactly what's going to go to the house every month, but that's not the case because it's changing, right? So at the beginning, you're not making much progress, right? That's why the curve is moving so slow. But then as you move over, as the time goes by, right, towards the end of your loan, you're going to be making huge amounts of payments that are going to be going to the house directly, very little to the interest. So it's going to take what you owe, it's going to shrink it very quickly, right? So you see this rapid decline in that curve. Okay, so here what we're looking at is that mortgage balances behave more like function B instead of function A. Okay, even though you're making a consistent payment, the difference is that as time goes by, more of that money is going to be going towards the balance of the house versus the interest. So it's going to knock off your balance quicker later on in life than at the beginning. Okay, so at the beginning, it's barely going to feel like it's moving, right? That's why it's so flat. But after a certain point, right, you're going to start to see your curve make some gains, and so it's going to decline steeply. Okay, and so that's what you see here at the end, right? That's a pretty steep decline in the curve. Okay, any questions about that so far? Okay, so we'll go ahead and stop here. We'll pick up number 3. We'll get to number 3, 4, and 6 hopefully next time. Number 6 is a good problem. It'll show you exactly. You can look at the entire 30 years worth of payments, and it'll show you how much interest you're going to pay here for this month and how much goes to the house in this month, and then the next month, and then the next month. And it does it for the full 30 years. So then it actually shows you like how you'll get to your final payment and what will happen at your final payment. And then after that, you'd be done paying off your house. Okay, so that's a good problem. This website, I already checked it and it does work. Okay, so I'll make sure that I already checked that it's not gonna not be there. Okay. All right, guys. So yeah, I wanted to just have a little fun and take a look at some houses. And so now you kind of have an idea of how these things are calculated. Okay. All right. Any questions for me?